Look at the waitress. That black uniform doesn't even fit her. She can't hide her lack of elegance. She looks like she walked straight out of some roadside diner. The laughter cracked through the ballroom like cruel thunder, echoing under the crystal chandeliers that shone over imported flower arrangements and silk-covered tables. The Crystal Ball, the most talked-about event of the year, had brought together billionaires, politicians, and heirs, each dressed as if they owned the world. Yet, that night, the spotlight wasn't on the $950 million contract about to be announced, nor on the orchestra of violins playing in the background. It was on her. The waitress. Martha Ellison. Though the uniform clung too tightly to her body, she walked with her back straight, balancing the tray in her steady hands with practiced grace. Martha wasn't the image the elite expected to see at an event like this. She was fat. Her arms, full and strong, moved with precision. Her figure stood in sharp contrast to the tall, thin silhouettes of the women parading around in haute couture gowns. And that contrast was exactly what fueled their ridicule. And you? Have you ever been humiliated because of your body or your appearance? Type the word strength in the comments and share your story. Your voice matters, and it may inspire someone else to never give up on who they truly are. A socialite, her tight dress hugging her frame, leaned toward her friend and whispered loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I would never have hired someone like that to serve at an event like this. It's just inelegant. She takes up too much space. The laughter was collective, carried by the cruel pleasure the wealthy found in turning someone into a punchline. But the waitress didn't respond. Her eyes remained steady, her face calm, her steps firm. Her silence was unsettling. Anyone who looked closely would notice there was no submission in her expression. There was something else. A quiet power, almost threatening, as if this woman, invisible to the arrogant, had the strength to change the course of the night. The ballroom was a parade of excess, marble columns gleaming, Persian rugs softening every step, candelabras shimmering across crystal glasses. Every detail had been carefully crafted to scream wealth. Men tossed around figures as casually as others would small talk. Women displayed diamonds worth more than entire houses. And in the middle of this spectacle, Martha walked with her tray, the target of mockery, smirks, and disdainful glances. At the head table, Gregory Vanzetti reigned like a maestro of cruelty. A real estate tycoon, his tailored suit barely contained his bulging stomach, yet it never stopped him from laughing at others. Rings glittered on his heavy fingers, and his smile carried the arrogance of a man who had always believed he was untouchable. His wife elegant, cold, untouchable, and their children, young heirs dripping with early arrogance, followed his every comment with approving looks. Who allowed this creature to walk among us? His wife sneered, raising her chin like a bored queen. She's ruining the shine of the party. The guests around her laughed with ease. Contempt was contagious. On the other side of the ballroom, Margaret Elwood watched in silence. She was the one responsible for organizing the event, for hiring the entire waitstaff, for planning every detail of the night. Margaret carried herself with a sober, austere air, rarely showing emotion. She didn't laugh, didn't intervene. She simply observed, her calculating gaze taking everything in. Martha approached a table where three young heiresses were laughing loudly. One of them, her face painted with far too much makeup, shamelessly pointed at the waitress's waist and sneered. Look at that, it's like her uniform is about to burst. Maybe she'll lose a few pounds running around with those trays. Her friends erupted into laughter, delighted by their own cruelty. Martha set the glasses down on the table with controlled movements and replied, her voice calm but firm enough for everyone to hear. The uniform might burst, but your lack of manners already has. The silence fell heavy, like a shadow. The young women flushed red, and the laughter that followed was more nervous than amused. Some guests coughed awkwardly, others looked away. But Gregory Vanzetti, pleased, raised his glass. Now even the help wants to give us lessons in morals, he said, smirking. I wonder what we'll hear next. The violins tried to fill the emptiness left by the awkward moment, but it was too late. With every provocation, Martha only grew in the eyes of those watching closely. Her calmness was irritating. Her firmness cut deeper than any insult could. Margaret Elwood never looked away from her. Something about that waitress didn't fit. There was dignity where there shouldn't have been. There was strength where only submission was expected. Hours passed. The laughter at Martha's expense became a kind of sport among the guests. But she endured. Tray after tray, step after step, upright and silent. Until, while bending to pick up a fallen glass, she noticed an envelope slipping from the leather folder of one of Gregory Vanzetti's aides. The embossed crest gave away its importance. Without drawing attention, Martha placed the envelope on her tray and walked on. Later, near a velvet curtain, she opened it discreetly. Her eyes widened at the heading. Agreement clauses, Vanzetti and Elwood Enterprises. She knew those terms. And in the middle of the pages, she recognized something that made her blood run cold. A clause that had no business being there. A clause she had seen before, back when she worked as an assistant at a law firm, in a case of fraud that had destroyed careers and siphoned away millions. Her heart raced. The ballroom carried on with music and laughter, but for Martha, every sound seemed distant, muffled. The phrase she had once overheard echoed in her mind like thunder beneath all that luxury. If that clause was real, the night would not be remembered as a celebration, but as the spark of a scandal powerful enough to shatter fortunes and bring entire dynasties crashing down. The laughter was no longer just in passing moments. It had become a constant backdrop, like the clinking of silverware against porcelain or the chime of crystal glasses. Every step Martha Ellison took across the ballroom seemed to trigger a new wave of sarcasm, as if her very presence were entertainment for the powerful. Some of the younger guests, emboldened by the cruelty of the group, pushed the mockery even further. Each time Martha walked past their tables, they jumped suddenly from their chairs, pretending to lose their balance as though the ground had trembled under her weight. The laughter exploded in cascades, turning their malice into a performance. For them, it didn't matter how sophisticated the setting was, nothing delighted them more than reducing a woman to the punchline of her own body. Since childhood, Martha had carried a burden that was never hers to bear, but one the world had forced on her without mercy. In the school hallways, cruel nicknames became routine, and the laughter of classmates drowned out any lesson. From a young age, Martha learned the weight of being different. While the other girls ran across playgrounds, she would retreat to quiet corners, books spread across her lap, pretending to be too absorbed to join in. It wasn't that she didn't want to play, but the easy laughter of her peers whenever they mocked her steps, her body, made her believe it was safer to remain invisible. As a teenager, the contrast grew sharper, more painful. Her friends tried on dresses, gossiped about dances and first crushes, while Martha hid behind stacks of notebooks. She preferred the company of written words to the exposure of a body that, in the eyes of others, never seemed good enough. The isolation hurt, but it also gave her a strange sense of control. Away from people, at least she was safe from ridicule. And it was from that very habit of protecting herself that her strength was born. Every time Martha hid away, she observed. She learned to see the details, to hear what wasn't spoken, to understand the soul of people beyond appearances. That quiet sensitivity became her greatest wealth. Years later, it was this very resilience, cultivated in the silence of corners and classrooms, that allowed her to endure humiliation with her head high and her gaze steady, as if nothing could strip her of her dignity. Back at the luxurious ball, Gregory Vanzetti watched every reaction from the head table. There was something almost childlike in his delight at humiliating others. To him, this waitress wasn't just an employee, she was free entertainment. His wife smiled in cold condescension, their children whispered venomous remarks, and the guests followed the choreography like actors in an old play. Everyone knew their role in the theater of arrogance. On the other side of the room, Margaret Elwood remained still, a glass of white wine in hand. Her sharp eyes moved from Martha, to the Vanzettis, to the rest of the guests. She showed no indignation, no approval. She only observed, as if studying a chessboard. For her, every gesture mattered, every word revealed more about people than they realized. "Careful, dear," a woman wearing pearls taunted, raising her glass deliberately as Martha approached. "If you spill a single drop, you might have to sell your whole house to pay for it." "Oh wait. I forgot. You probably don't even own one." The group laughed in unison. Martha set the glass in front of her with the same calm as always and replied softly, but loud enough to be heard. "The price of a drink can't cover the lack of manners of the one drinking it." For a moment, the laughter died. The woman flushed, trying to disguise her embarrassment, but soon her friends picked up the ridicule again. Still, some nearby guests turned their eyes away, uncomfortable. The first crack in the wall of arrogance had appeared. Margaret noticed. Her eyes lingered on Martha for several seconds longer, as if taking note of that small, silent victory. Martha kept going. With every tray delivered, with every measured step, she felt the tension grow. She wasn't just carrying glasses, she was carrying an invisible battle between her dignity and their contempt. The envelope tucked into her apron seemed to burn against her, a constant reminder that something far greater was at stake. But the night had yet to reveal its full weight. As she passed near a group of executives in flawless suits, Martha caught fragments of their conversation. It wasn't meant for her ears, but one hushed voice cut through the air like lightning. "If they uncover the hidden clause, the $950 million deal will collapse." Martha froze. The laughter, the violins, the footsteps, everything faded for an instant. Her eyes lifted slowly, but none of them looked at her. They kept talking as if she didn't exist. She drew a breath, steadying herself, and resumed her route. But inside, a certainty began to form. She wasn't just the target of humiliation that night. She was at the center of something much bigger, something that could topple empires. Martha didn't yet know how, but one thing was clear: that hidden clause in the contract was more explosive than any insult. And if it came to light, the crystal ballroom could turn into a field of ruins before dawn. The envelope still burned against her apron. The word she had read wouldn't leave her mind: the hidden clause, the detail that could implode a $950 million deal. She knew it wasn't a mistake. She knew it was fraud. And yet, here she was, invisible, serving drinks to people who treated her like an inconvenience. The weight wasn't only on her shoulders, it pressed on her conscience. To reveal it meant exposing herself. To remain silent meant carrying the burden of complicity. A group of heirs, drunk on too much champagne, laughed as she passed. "Look, the waitress is choking on her own silence. I bet she can't take more than a few steps without sweating. Maybe we should help her up and down the stairs. Or do you think the stairs wouldn't hold her weight?" The laughter exploded like fireworks. Martha didn't react. Her steps remained steady, but inside, she felt the air thinning. The grand, glittering hall seemed to close in on her, as if the luxury itself were a cage. And then, Margaret Elwood appeared. She slipped closer quietly, as if she didn't want to draw attention. Her navy blue dress stood out against her pale skin, and her assessing eyes settled on Martha with studied calm. "You look like you're carrying a weight no one here dares to face," she said softly, almost as a confidant. Martha startled, surprised. She didn't know if she had just been discovered or if it was merely a vague observation. She studied Margaret for a few seconds, trying to decipher if there was irony in her voice. But there wasn't. It was simply a statement. I'm just working," Martha replied, maintaining her professional composure. Margaret didn't press further. She simply set her glass on the waitress's tray and slipped back into the crowd. But her words echoed inside Martha like a calling. The ballroom felt more suffocating with each passing moment. The marble columns, the exotic flowers, the glittering chandeliers, all had become symbols of a power that crushed any attempt at resistance. The contract, the hidden clauses, the cruel laughter, all of it weighed down on her like a storm. And then Gregory Vanzetti's voice sliced through the air, louder than the music, more imposing than the laughter of the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed, raising his glass with a tone dripping with false joviality. Before we officially announce our agreement, what better way to celebrate the diversity of this evening? The guests turned toward him, some curious, others already sensing the sarcasm in his voice. Gregory spread his arms theatrically. I want to invite to the stage our distinguished collaborator for the night. The waitress. The invisible who has become so very visible. The laughter rippled across the hall like an electric current. Martha froze for an instant. Every eye was now on her. Come on, dear, Gregory continued, his smile venomous. Toast with us. Say a few words. Show us that even simplicity has a voice in a place like this. It was a trap, and everyone knew it. This wasn't inclusion, it was humiliation. The crowd expected her to stammer, blush, stumble over her words. They were ready to laugh at her one more time. Martha drew in a deep breath. Her heart pounded, but her steps carried her toward the stage. Each footfall was followed by hungry eyes, desperate for her shame. Some women whispered to each other, men made quiet bets, and young heirs held up their phones, eager to record the scene. The microphone waited for her, glowing under the golden lights. The ballroom held its breath, not with respect, but with judgment. Gregory handed her the microphone with a satisfied grin, like a man offering rope to someone about to hang themselves. Go ahead, dear. Give us a toast. Speak for all of us. Martha took the microphone. Her fingers trembled for a moment, but her eyes never wavered. For the first time that night, her silence wasn't just defense. It was a prelude. And when she spoke, it wasn't the voice of a servant that filled the ballroom, but the beginning of something no one had expected to hear. Instead of the humiliation they had anticipated, Martha lifted the microphone with strength. And in that instant, everyone realized that the voice of the invisible waitress was about to change the course of the evening and perhaps entire fortunes. The ballroom, accustomed to laughter and toasts, sank into a heavy silence as Martha Ellison raised the microphone. For a heartbeat, it was as if everyone breathed together, waiting for the stumble, the nervous laugh, the breakdown. But when her voice came, though shaky, it carried a firmness none of them had foreseen. Tonight, she began, her gaze sweeping across the hall, all of you speak of fortune, of million-dollar contracts, of deals that decide the future of entire families. But what few of you realized is that among all these crystal glasses and imported flowers, someone dropped more than just a drink. Someone dropped their mask. A few guests exchanged puzzled looks. Others chuckled, convinced this was just a nervous ramble. Gregory Vanzetti crossed his arms, smiling broadly, already prepared to watch her public disaster. Martha drew another breath. Tonight, you laughed at me. You made my body a spectacle. To some of you, I was nothing but a joke, as if every step I took was too heavy for this ballroom. But let me tell you something, the weight was never mine. The real weight has always been in the choices you tried to hide behind contracts and polished smiles. The silence in the air grew dense, uncomfortable. I saw the contract, she said clearly. And I know what's hidden in it. The laughter stopped. Glasses were set down quietly on tables. Even the violinists ceased playing, as if they too felt the gravity of her words. A clause, Martha continued, her voice steadier now, fed by her own courage. A clause that should not exist. A clause that guarantees profits for only one side of the deal while placing all the risk on the other. It's fraud. The impact was immediate. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, a few chuckled nervously, trying to diffuse the tension. What could a waitress possibly know about contracts, a banker muttered, drawing a few restrained snickers from those around him. But no one laughed loudly. No one dared turn into a joke something that sounded this serious. Gregory Vanzetti stepped forward, his face now hardened. Enough of this charade, he barked. Guards, remove her from here at once. 2 security men began to move, but Margaret Elwood's cold, measured voice cut through the air. Let her speak. The men froze, uncertain. All eyes turned toward Margaret, who remained calm, a glass still in her hand. "I want to hear her too," she added evenly. "If there is an accusation, it deserves to be heard." Gregory scowled, furious, but didn't dare confront her outright. Margaret wasn't just another guest. She was the organizer of the event, the executive responsible for safeguarding the flawless image of the evening. Her word carried weight. Martha drew in a breath. For a fleeting moment, her eyes met Margaret's, and in that gaze, she found confirmation that she wasn't entirely alone. Turning back to the guests, she spoke. "I've seen this clause before," she said firmly. "It was used in another contract years ago to justify the siphoning of millions. People lost everything while one family grew even richer. And now, here it is again, hidden in the fine print no one bothers to read." The silence was absolute. Some tried to laugh, but the sound died in their throats. Others looked around nervously, already calculating the consequences. A few discreetly reached for their phones, wondering if this would hit the press before the night was over. Gregory erupted. "This is an outrage," he roared, his face flushed red. "A waitress daring to defame my name, my family, my empire? She knows nothing. She's just a fat woman who should be washing dishes, not speaking about business." His words echoed through the ballroom like a punch. The insult, raw and violent, drew no laughter this time. It drew silence. Even those who had mocked Martha minutes earlier recoiled, visibly uncomfortable. She did not lower her gaze. "I know enough to recognize fraud. And if you try to silence me, it won't matter," she declared, her voice unshaken. "Because the evidence isn't only with me. It's already secured somewhere else. And if anything happens here tonight, the truth will be out in a matter of hours." A murmur rippled through the hall. Some guests went pale. Others began whispering furiously. The sense that the Crystal Empire was about to shatter spread across the room like wildfire. Gregory, seething, took another step forward, but this time, no laughter carried him. Every gaze was split between him and Martha. The invisible waitress no longer seemed invisible. She was now the voice that could destroy a $950 million fortune, and she had just made it clear she would not be silenced. The heavy silence lasted only seconds before the explosion came. A storm of voices, hurried footsteps, frantic whispers, the scrape of chairs against the floor. What had been a performance of luxury just moments ago was unraveling into chaos. Some guests rushed to leave, hoping to slip away unnoticed, as if simply staying made them complicit. Others, bolder, pulled out their phones and began recording, capturing the waitress on stage, the furious magnate before her, and the tension teetering on the edge of collapse. The violins had stopped completely. The musicians stood frozen, instruments in hand, bewildered witnesses to a disaster unfolding in real time. Martha Ellison stood her ground, microphone still in hand. Her heart raced, but her eyes did not waver. For the first time, she was no longer invisible. Everyone saw her. Everyone heard her. "Listen closely," Gregory Vanzetti thundered, desperate to regain control. "This woman is an imposter. A mere waitress, spinning lies to tarnish my name and sabotage a legitimate deal." Some tried to applaud in support of Gregory, but the clapping died quickly. The seed of doubt had already been planted, and doubt was all it took to fracture million-dollar alliances. One of the oldest investors, his face stern and his voice deep, rose from the head table. "If it's a lie, then show us the contract right now. Prove there's nothing hidden." For a brief moment, Gregory turned pale, though he quickly tried to recover his usual haughty air. "I don't have to prove anything to anyone," he snapped, but his voice no longer carried the same strength. Martha seized the opening. "That's exactly what you counted on, that no one would question, that everyone would just sign, toast, and smile. But it's all there, in the fine print, buried beneath promises of profit. And this isn't the first time you've done it." The murmurs grew, spreading like fire through dry grass. Investors leaned into one another, whispering frantically. Some were already typing on their phones, others rushing out to make urgent calls. The $950 million contract was in very real danger, and everyone knew it. Gregory stormed forward, his face crimson, his eyes blazing. "Shut your mouth," he roared, dropping all pretense of elegance. "You are nothing. Just a fat, bitter woman hiding behind a tray, sneaking into my event." The attack was so vicious it drew gasps of disapproval. The insult, once fuel for laughter, now sounded revolting. Even those who had mocked Martha earlier looked away, ashamed. It was then that Margaret Elwood rose to her feet. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her cold, controlled tone cut through the chaos with more force than any shout. "What she said has merit." The ballroom froze. Every eye turned to Margaret. She calmly set her glass down and continued. "I read the preliminary versions of the contract. And yes, there were questionable clauses that were never made public. If she claims she found the same manipulation, it would be reckless to ignore her." The blow was devastating. Margaret's word carried weight. She was respected, known for her precision and impartiality. If she even hinted at confirming Martha's accusation, there was no sweeping it under the rug. Gregory staggered for an instant, as if struck by an invisible fist. "You're against me," he bellowed, pointing at Margaret. "You put the word of a servant above mine?" "It isn't her word," Margaret replied, cold and steady. "It's the truth. And the truth, sooner or later, always finds a way." The hall erupted again in murmurs. Guests hurried toward the exits, others tried to capture every detail with their phones. The spectacle was no longer one of luxury, it was one of scandal. The contract, once paraded as a triumph, was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Then, a journalist, invited only to cover the glamour of the event, felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, eyes widening, and showed it to the colleagues beside him. The notification was unmistakable. $950 million fraud exposed live at Gala. The murmur turned into frenzy. Everyone wanted to know, everyone wanted to see, everyone wanted to record. And in that instant, Gregory Vanzetti realized he was no longer fighting a waitress. He was fighting the truth, a truth spreading faster than any fortune could contain. The ballroom, once a symbol of power, had become a stage of ruin. And Martha Ellison, the invisible waitress, was now the voice everyone listened to as the news raced across the world, turning the gala into an irreversible scandal. The room no longer resembled a ball. The glow of the chandeliers, the perfume of the exotic flowers, all of it was drowned out by shouts, hurried footsteps, and the frantic buzzing of cell phones recording every detail. The name Vanzetti, once synonymous with power, now echoed like a stain. Gregory Vanzetti's face was crimson, twisted with rage. Around him, his wife and children scrambled to contain the disaster, only making it worse. One son shouted that it was all a setup, another shoved a guest who was filming. The chaos only grew, and the more they screamed, the more pathetic they appeared. "Don't you see?" Gregory roared, his voice hoarse. "It's all lies. This woman made it all up." But no one believed him anymore. It didn't matter how many times he repeated it, how much he insisted. The trust was gone. And in the center of the storm, Martha Ellison stood tall. The microphone had been taken from her hand, but it didn't matter. Her presence alone was enough. Standing tall, breathing deeply, she did not tremble. She wasn't seeking revenge, nor did she smile at the downfall of others. She simply repeated, whenever someone approached her, "I told the truth. That's all." That serenity disarmed the Vanzettis even more. While they raged like cornered beasts, she remained unshaken, and the contrast was impossible to ignore. The woman once mocked as an object of ridicule now stood as a mirror of dignity, the billionaire family, a caricature of despair. Some guests, once complicit in the laughter, now looked at Martha with different eyes. there was respect, even admiration. A few murmured words of support as they slipped out of the ballroom. And every gesture, however small, lifted Martha higher than any stage could. It was then that Margaret Elwood approached. Unlike the chaos around her, she walked calmly, her eyes steady and calculating. She stopped in front of Martha as though recognizing something rare. "You never wanted to be here," Margaret said quietly, but loud enough to be heard. "And yet, you were the only one with the courage to say what everyone else was afraid to." Martha didn't answer. She simply held her gaze. Margaret leaned slightly closer, as if sharing a secret. "Tell me, do you really want to go back to what you were doing before?" A deliberate pause. "I can open doors for you." Martha's heart nearly faltered. For years, she had dreamed of reclaiming the life stripped from her by injustice. But she didn't answer right away. In her hands, she still held the tray, the same tray she had carried all night, the symbol of the uniform that bound her to invisibility. Meanwhile, the Vanzettis were collapsing further. A security guard tried to restrain Gregory, but was shoved aside. His wife sobbed and screamed about suing everyone present for defamation. His sons quarreled with journalists, shouting over each other. A scene once unimaginable for such a dynasty had become a public spectacle of ruin. And Martha remained the center of calm. "I was never looking for revenge," she said at last, meeting Margaret's eyes. "I just couldn't stay silent anymore." Margaret nodded, as though she had expected nothing less. "Sometimes, it only takes one voice to bring down an empire," she replied. "And that voice can build something much greater." The words lingered in the air like a promise. Martha realized that what stood before her wasn't just an offer, but an invitation to a future. The ballroom, now nearly empty, smelled of extinguished candles and the bitter perfume of forgotten flowers. The musicians had packed away their instruments. Only a few onlookers, journalists, and the final sparks of a scandal remained echoes destined to travel far beyond that night. Martha slowly walked to one of the tables, gathering broken glasses and setting them carefully on her tray. It was as if she needed to remind herself who she still was, not to be swept away by the whirlwind of change. Tray in hand, she looked out at the empty ballroom. For a moment, she felt peace. The weight on her shoulders seemed lighter. Perhaps, at last, it had all been worth it. The ballroom was now a field of echoes. Where once there had been music, laughter, and opulence, there was only the sound of hurried footsteps and tense whispers. The Vanzettis were ruined, shouting, grasping desperately at the irreversible. Each word they uttered only dragged them further into disgrace. And in the midst of it all, Martha stood tall, still holding her tray as if it were a silent shield. She did not smile. She did not revel. Her victory did not lie in the fall of the arrogant, but in the dignity she had preserved to the very end. It was then Margaret Elwood approached, her steps steady. "You have no idea the strength you showed tonight," she said, regarding Martha as if she had just discovered a diamond hidden beneath the dust. "If you want, I can help you reclaim what you lost. The world needs people like you." Her words washed over Martha like a wave. For years, she had been reduced to silence, to the uniform of a waitress, to nights of invisibility. And now, in front of everyone, she was offered something she had never dared to dream again, a new beginning. A few months later, she was no longer a waitress carrying trays between crystal glasses. Martha had reclaimed a place that had once been stolen from her, the world of law. Before being pushed into anonymity, she had been a student at a respected law school. She had dreamed of defending the most vulnerable, but lost her scholarship after refusing to take part in a fraudulent scheme during an internship. She spoke out, and in return, she was silenced. With no income, no support, she was forced to abandon her studies and take whatever job would pay the bills. That's how she ended up in the ballrooms of the wealthy, serving them, invisible. But that gala night had changed everything. Her courage to expose the fraudulent clause brought back into the light the injustice that had once silenced her. With Margaret's help, she returned to university, completing the degree fate had tried to take away. Now, back in a law office, Martha no longer carried trays, she carried cases that made her soul come alive. Sitting before a desk piled with documents, she read every line carefully, determined never again to let a contract hide the truth. Her name, once ignored, was beginning to be recognized as that of a young attorney who could not be bought, who would not be silenced. And every time she crossed the glass-lined lobby of the firm, she remembered the ballroom. The mockery, the laughter, the cruel stares no longer wounded her. They had become her fuel. Because in the end, Martha had reclaimed what had been stolen, her voice, her dignity, and her right to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for all those who, like her, had once been considered invisible. What happened to Martha is a reminder that true strength doesn't come from power, wealth, or status, it comes from courage. In a world that often celebrates appearances and silences the vulnerable, one voice was enough to shake an empire. Her story proves that dignity cannot be bought, and truth cannot be buried forever. Even those the world tries to make invisible carry within them the power to expose lies, to challenge injustice, and to inspire change. Because sometimes, all it takes is the courage of one person to remind everyone else, the truth always finds a way. If Martha's story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Join us for more powerful stories that prove courage and truth can change everything.